Hey folks, I don't know about you guys, but if you are given information and you are force-fed information and then you are hit over the head with a sledgehammer by the information, normally some kind of way it sinks in. For most regular people like you and I assume that we're all regular people, when we're presented with facts, we don't just close our eyes, stick our head in the sand, and ignore them. We react to them. Now, whether we believe them or not, we will normally accept that the other party that's presenting the facts to us, you know, they are honest people doing the right thing. And normally we'll take a look at those facts, hopefully do our own investigation if necessary, and come to our own conclusions. Now, it's a little different when you're having the 17 intelligence agencies coming to you all in agreement that the Russians were involved in the elections. Now, none of them are saying that they hacked into any voting machines or changed any numbers. All they're saying is that they utilized certain techniques in order to potentially or possibly give a certain appearance of Hillary Clinton, i.e. in the negative. And in this case, Mr. Trump is equating their interference in our political process with the delegitimizing of his presidency, of his election. Well, you know something? If he keeps pushing that point, he may be right. But we do know, on the one hand, that they were definitely involved. Now, if he wants to say because they were involved, his presidency or his election was illegitimate, that's up to him. Thus far, the majority of the people that I see on mainstream media and across social media are not making that claim, okay? The majority of the people are basically saying that Clinton ran a piece of crap campaign and she didn't do what she needed to do. Because if she had, she would have won, irregardless of the interference. So basically people are concentrating on the fact that there was interference in our political process. I would love to know why Donald Trump has such a bromance with Vladimir Putin. And one of the few ways that we will be able to know that is to be able to see his tax return. Because honestly, we've seen this before. Vladimir Putin had his hooks into the previous German chancellor before Merkel got in there. He had his hooks into the Italian president, and he has his hooks into various other officials in European governments. Why do I say he has his hooks in? Because it was proven that there was financial linkage to all of the people that I mentioned. It's proven. So if in fact that was the case in the past, we need to see whether that is the case now. And the only way for us to be able to see that would be for us to see copies of Mr. Trump's tax returns. But honestly, I don't think that's going to happen. Anyway, let me play this clip regarding the meeting that he had with the four major intelligence agency heads.
and cast aspersions on the U.S. intelligence community in the process. But on Friday, he met the men who run America's intelligence agencies face-to-face for a briefing on the hacking of the DNC. The intel chiefs believe that Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the cyber espionage operation because he wanted to do two things: undermine Hillary Clinton, whether that meant preventing her from winning or hobbling her should she become president, and if possible, help Donald Trump win the White House. Those conclusions were made clear in a newly declassified report released on Friday. Again, Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process and to denigrate Hillary Clinton to harm her chances of winning or harm her potential presidency, all of which just happened to benefit Donald Trump. After the briefing, Trump gave no indication that at long last he accepts those conclusions. In a statement, he said, quote, "While Russia, China, other countries, outside groups, and people are constantly trying to break through the cyber infrastructure of our governmental institutions, businesses, and organizations, including the Democrat National Committee, there was absolutely no effect on the outcome of the election." And its Democratic National Committee. Joining me now are Malcolm Nance, author of The Plot to Hack America, How Putin's Cyber Spies and WikiLeaks Tried to Steal the 2016 Election, former intelligence operative Naveed Jamali, David Korn, Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones, and journalist Sarah Kendzior. Thank you all for being here. So let's just get right to Donald Trump's seeming refusal to be able to accept, Malcolm, the conclusions of the intelligence community, even when the heads of the intelligence agencies are sitting in front of him, telling him this happened. Why, in your view, will he not just accept it?
I think because when Donald Trump made his statement on July 27th of last year, where he asked for Russia to hack Hillary Clinton and release her emails, at that point he went from being an unwitting, useful idiot to Russia to actually believing that they were working in his favor. And to admit that now, in the face of all the evidence, he would believe that this would delegitimize his presidency. So he's going to fight to the end to not allow this to become a narrative. I suspect in 2 weeks he's going to attempt to cover this all up and even gut the intelligence community. Where he is going is he's pushing this nation to a constitutional crisis of unprecedented magnitude, because no one has ever worked in the interest of a hostile nation and supporting, to a certain extent, a hostile intelligence service.
And, you know, Sarah, you've written a lot about and talked a lot about this. It's just weird affinity between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and sort of the symmetry between the way that they talk. So in this intelligence report, which is fascinating reading, I recommend everybody do it, one of the things that jumped out to me was this idea that one reason Vladimir Putin hates Hillary Clinton so much and wanted essentially revenge against her was for his belief that she, as Secretary of State, undermined the credibility of his election when he was elected again to be the president of Russia, and that he felt that she'd undermined the legitimacy of that win. Fast forward to Friday. This is before he had the intelligence meeting. Donald Trump said the focus on Russian hacking is a political witch hunt, and he's still trying to characterize it as an attempt to delegitimize him. And I don't know, does it strike you, as it does me, that that is very similar to the way that Vladimir Putin has approached the reactions to his election?
Yeah, it's similar in numerous respects. And of course, you know, Putin likes to emphasize, you know, what's going on in other countries in order to divert public attention in Russia from problems that they're having there. In terms of it, you know, in terms of Hillary Clinton's role, I think it's not just revenge on Putin's part, but pragmatism. Because had Hillary Clinton won the election, she, you know, would have definitely kept the sanctions. I think that, you know, she would have gone through with this investigation. But I also, you know, want to emphasize that this investigation into Russian interference into the election is still a nonpartisan issue. And had Hillary Clinton won the election, we would still be discussing this. It's not a matter of having this investigation to, you know, delegitimize Trump's win or anything like that. It's a matter of national security. And that's why I think, you know, it's very important that we establish that this is a threat to American safety. As Malcolm just said, it's an unprecedented crisis that is indeed a constitutional crisis. And so that's, I think, what we should keep foremost in mind as we move forward.
And everyone seems to agree with that, Sarah, except Donald Trump. Naveed, I want to go to you because one of the aspects of this that I think a lot of people don't focus as much on is the Julian Assange factor in all of this. Let me play you what the exchange between John McCain and DNI Clapper, the National Intelligence Director James Clapper, and this is at that hearing on Thursday. Take a listen.
The name Mr. Assange has popped up, and I believe that he is the one who's responsible for publishing names of individuals that work for us that put their lives in direct danger. Is that correct?
Yes, he has.
And do you think that there's any credibility we should attach to this individual given his record of
Not in my view.
So, Naveed, you have Julian Assange then going before that, doing an interview with a very solicitous Sean Hannity on Fox News saying, no, the Russians were not our source. And then you have Trump with the following two tweets. This is one from Wednesday, one from Thursday. On Wednesday, quote, Julian Assange says a 14-year-old could have hacked Podesta. Why was DNC so careless? Also says Russians did not give him the info. Echoing exactly what he said to Sean Hannity. We go to another one. Trump tweeting on Thursday. The dishonest media like saying that I'm in agreement with Julian Assange. Wrong. I'm simply state what he states. It's for the people to make up their own minds for the truth. The media lies to make it look like I'm going against, quote, intelligence. Putting intelligence in quotes when in fact I am a big fan.
Now that is so stupid. Donald Trump says the dishonest media likes saying that I am in agreement with Julian Assange. Wrong. I simply state what he states. If you state the same damn thing that he states, then you're in agreement. Idiot.
What do you make of all of that, Naveed?
Well, Joy, I mean, look, whenever I come on this show, I mean, there's a preparation from doing talking points. I think many Americans don't understand that when it comes to journalism, whether it's mainstream media or not, there's ethical standards. There's this concept of the public good. It bothers me greatly to see someone like Julian Assange be extended that same sort of protection and concept that he's a journalist. I mean, clearly we have the DNI, we have the intelligence community coming out here and saying, look, there is a link, and I was hoping they would actually name that person, but nonetheless, there's a part in there where they talk about RT coming to the Ecuadorian embassy and speaking to Julian Assange. There is very clear evidence that the Russians were passing information to WikiLeaks, and I would suspect that Julian Assange was very much aware of where that information was coming from. And it bothers me to think that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange is given his protection and treated as a journalist. He really isn't. We have to sort of come up with this concept that sort of says, look, journalism, freedom of speech, absolutely. But someone like WikiLeaks, someone who can take stolen information and essentially use it against us, not for the public good, but essentially to undermine our election, to undermine our democracy. This is not okay. And someone who worked undercover, and I have to say, I am glad that my time stopped in 2009, because from Snowden on forward, I think that my life would have been at risk, and I very much worry for those operatives today who have to go out there with the trust that their name, their identity is protected when we have people like Assange and people like Snowden who are glamorized, frankly, out there. It bothers me immensely.
Now, I will say one thing, okay? Donald Trump's intelligence briefing was much more detailed than the information that we're getting. But even the information that we're getting indicates that the intelligence agencies gave the links from point A to point B for Donald Trump, i.e., they gave the exact parties that actually did the hacking, okay, which was the government, Russian government and people they hired. They gave the intermediaries, which were Russian officials that met with Julian Assange and gave him the information, okay? And then the fact that Julian Assange, through WikiLeaks, published that information. They made the complete linkage, and he still won't go for it.
David, I think that's an important point, because none of this would have proceeded in the same way, let's just say, if it hadn't been for WikiLeaks being the conduit, meaning that WikiLeaks enabled the Russians to get this information to a very specific place, and that is to the left. And because of the Edward Snowden situation, because of the Manning situation, the left had been sort of essentially groomed to accept WikiLeaks as the unvarnished truth in the same way that some on the right accept other sort of non-news sources as the unvarnished truth. It didn't go through the filter of the, quote, mainstream media. It went straight into the bloodstream of the left that had already been set up with the Snowden situation, et cetera, to trust WikiLeaks. So are we not paying enough attention to the fact that this non-governmental actor, Julian Assange, who's holed up in an embassy somewhere, was able to manipulate the American election as much as the Russians were?
Well, I think WikiLeaks' role in this is really interesting, but I don't think it's critical. We saw a website called DC Leaks. We saw Guccifer, a hacker, probably more a collective of Russian hackers, as Malcolm has written about, passing information to journalists right, left, and middle. I do believe, and the Russians, the KGB in the old days, used to get information and they used to feed it out through, through various media outlets throughout Europe. I believe that however the Russians, got the information, they would have been able to disseminate it. WikiLeaks ended up being very convenient because it was already established and it created this sort of whistleblowing culture, even though it's hard to call this whistleblowing if it's coming from Russian intelligence. One point I'd like to make too is that Donald Trump again is out tweeting this morning in complete denial, and he keeps on saying that these, that the Russian meddling, which he doesn't really acknowledge, but that the emails that came out, the hacks had no impact on the election. Yet, you could run the tape here at MSNBC. Again and again and again during the campaign, he kept citing the WikiLeaks leaks, which came from Russia, as proof that Hillary Clinton was a criminal and was corrupt. And David Frum had a great piece in The Atlantic a couple of days ago showing how Trump was actually exaggerating. He's taking this material coming out and hyping it and making it sound much worse than it was. So he used this material day in, day out as political ammunition against Hillary Clinton, and he said, I love WikiLeaks, I love these leaks. He called on Russia to hack more, and now he says it had no effect. Well, he can't have it both ways, except he can, because that's how he operates.
And exactly, if it wasn't for WikiLeaks, half of his talking points would not have been there. So he can't say that WikiLeaks and the Russians hacking had no effect on the election. Any little kid would understand that it absolutely did. Was it enough to give him the election? Honestly, nobody knows that. So you can have conjecture on one side or the other. But the fact that it did have an effect, that cannot be denied.
And Sarah, that is an important point, because it was much more effective what WikiLeaks did and what the Russian did. In this report, it says that DC Leaks is a creation, essentially, of Russian intelligence, that RT is a propaganda arm. So they controlled, in a lot of ways, the outlets they used to get it out. But they also had a guy named Donald Trump who was selling this stuff on stage, selling it at his rallies. He was the chief marketer of the information that WikiLeaks was putting out, right?
Absolutely.
Sarah?
Yeah, that's right. And I think one other thing that needs to be mentioned is that Trump does not stand alone. Trump has a team, and Trump's team has been heavily involved with Russia in fairly questionable ways. You could look at people like Manafort and Flynn and Page. Flynn, who's about to become our national security advisor, should his confirmation come through. And you have to question what their connection is to Putin. This is not a matter of Trump as an individual. This is a matter of Trump as a team, of his connections, of his financial connections, of financial benefits that he and others on that team may have made. And that, together with this propaganda apparatus, is what this interference is about. And I hope that, in the next 2 weeks especially, our hearings and our government officials are more forthright about in what capacity did these advisors serve, and what kind of connections they have. As we know, Manafort is under, or at least was under, FBI investigation for his connection to Russia. That's a fairly significant thing. So I hope we hear more about that in the days to come.
Yeah, and she forgot to mention Rex Tillerson and what his actual connections are to Russia. We already know that he got one of the highest civilian awards presented to him by Putin. So just how deep does that rabbit hole go?
Carter Page, who was responsible for changing that plank in the RNC platform to the benefit of Russia. Roger Stone, who bragged openly about having direct connections to Julian Assange and that he had these previews of what WikiLeaks was going to bring out. I think it's worth asking whether anyone on that team was aware of what Guccifer and all these others were doing. Very interesting questions. Right. Malcolm, Naveed, and David are going to be back. Sarah, Kenzie.
All right, so, it is what it is, and you know, the people voted for this guy, so guess what? We're going to have to live with it, at least for now.